One man, one ship, one signature from a sitting U.S. president. $200,000 in a single voyage, while every other American merchant was grounded by law. In 1995, a former Army intelligence sergeant named Fritz Springmeier published a book naming what he called the 13 ruling Satanic bloodlines of the world. Chapter 1. The Astors. Today we read every claim in that chapter, in his voice, exactly as he wrote it. Then we check every name, every date, every dollar amount against the historical record. Tier 1, primary documents. Tier 2, mainstream press and biographies. Tier 3, independent investigations. By the end, we know which bricks of the bloodline thesis stand, which crumble, and which were never bricks at all. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I deal with real facts, not theory. There are 13 ruling Illuminati bloodlines at the top of the world. The Astor family is one of them. The history books we were given are doctored. Great power is concentrated in the hands of oligarchies, and these oligarchies, these families, are satanic. They have moved in secret for centuries, behind layers of cover organizations. 5 of those 13 families are the inside core. The Astors are in the outer ring of that core. They are above the law because they are the law. The original founder of the Astor fortune, John Jacob Astor, did not rise on social grace. He had none. He was cold-hearted, antisocial, a man who once wiped his dirty hands on the shirt of a neighbor at a formal dinner. A poor German butcher who could not speak English in 1784 and who, within 3 years of arrival in New York, was the master of Holland Lodge No. 8 in the Freemasons. He rose because the occult hierarchy gave him the right to rise. The Committee of 300, a hidden legislative council, opened the doors. Others stepped aside. They had no choice. Astor was born in Waldorf, Duchy of Baden, in 1763, from a Jewish bloodline that the family has worked hard to hide. He emigrated to America in 1784 by way of London, where his brother George introduced him to British intelligence. His other brother Henry met him in New York. He soon married a Sarah Todd, whose family is frequently associated with Satanism, and whose Brevoort relations were among the most influential in New York. By 1788, he was master of Holland Lodge No. 8, later Grand Treasurer of the Grand Lodge of New York from 1796 to 1801, Junior Grand Warden twice, Secretary of the Encampments, a busy Mason for a supposedly busy businessman. Then came the favors. In 1807, the United States government placed an embargo on all American ships. 2 Illuminati members, President Thomas Jefferson and Treasury Secretary Albert Gallatin, gave Astor a special exemption. His ship sailed. He cleared close to $200,000 in a single voyage, in 1807 money. He prospered during the War of 1812, while his competitors were ruined. He worked land deals with another Illuminatus, George Clinton. According to the researcher John Coleman, who had access to classified documents as an intelligence agent, John Jacob Astor was a British secret agent. Astor entered the fur trade and, in a handful of years, eliminated every competitor and held a monopoly. The town of Astoria, Oregon, was created out of his fur company, and Astoria, today, is a hotbed for satanic covens in Oregon. He participated in the opium trade to China. He publicly quit running opium in 1818. John Coleman writes that the Committee of 300, through the British East India Company, chose who would be permitted to participate in the lucrative China opium trade, and the beneficiaries of that grant remained forever wedded to the committee. Another of the top 13 families, the Russells, was also chosen. The Panic of 1837 let him foreclose on 1,000 mortgages. He sat on the 5-director board of Hamilton's Bank of the United States. By 1844, his wealth equaled 1/15 of every dollar invested in American industry, a measurement we take from Gustavus Myers' History of the Great American Fortunes, page 147, published in 1909. By 1890, the Astors owned 1/20 of all New York City real estate. By my estimate today, they are worth $40 billion, much of it hidden. The next generations were no better. William Backhouse Astor was a slum landlord. Half the children of his tenants did not reach age 20. John Jacob Astor III backed the corrupt Tammany ring of Boss Tweed. Mayor Tweed went to prison for life. The Astors were overlooked. Colonel John Jacob Astor I went down with the Titanic, and to his honor, he did not push a woman aside to save himself. He had also written, in 1894, a novel, A Journey in Other Worlds, describing the souls of the righteous dwelling on Saturn to a background of weird music. Saturn means Satan. The book is a confession in fiction. William Waldorf Astor built the Waldorf Hotel at 33rd and 5th Avenue, opening March 1893. His cousins added the Astoria in 1897. The site, later, was cleared for the Empire State Building. The same William Waldorf owned the Pall Mall Gazette, the Observer, the Pall Mall Magazine. From 1922 onward, the Astors controlled the Times of London, the chief organ of British news. In 1901, the Astors contributed to the founding of the Pilgrim Society, the public cover for the 6th degree American and British Princes of the Illuminati. At least 5 Astors I can name have been members. Baron Astor of Hever served as president of the London branch in the 1970s. In 1910, they were among the financial backers, alongside Abe Bailey of the Round Table groups, Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner's Society of the Elect, the very top circle. The Rhodes Scholarship System, which the Astors helped to underwrite, is in effect the first-degree initiation of the Illuminati. In 1919, the Royal Institute of International Affairs was created, the British equivalent of the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Astors were the major financial backers. Waldorf Astor sat on it. In the 1930s, the Fabian Socialists created the Political and Economic Planning Group. The Mason Viscount Waldorf Astor was a leader of it. David Astor attended Bilderberg in 1957 and again in 1966. The family has been present at every node of the planning apparatus, from Masonic Lodge to Bilderberg. Nancy Astor, the first woman to sit as a member of Parliament, was a close friend of the Fabian communist George Bernard Shaw. She and Waldorf Astor visited Stalin's Russia in the 1930s and were treated like royalty. She supported Christian Science, which was a front for witchcraft from its inception. She wrote a book on the early Mason communist Bakunin. The Cliveden estate, the country house of the Astors, was the hub of the Round Table of Rhodes Scholars, and of what is publicly remembered as the appeasement set that gave Hitler space to grow. Owen Lattimore was the Astor proxy for the opium trade, working through Laura Spellman and the Institute of Pacific Relations. The IPR is the same organization that supervised the Illuminati's decision to admit Red China to the opium trade, and the IPR helped lay the groundwork for Pearl Harbor. Vincent Astor was a member of 41 private clubs. He was a director of Chase Manhattan, American Express, Western Union Telegraph, the Great Northern Railroad, the Illinois Central Railroad, the International Mercantile Marine Company, the National Park Bank, the New York County Trust, Atlantic Fruit and Sugar, the Cuban Dominican Sugar Company, and more. He was an advisor to Bankers Trust of New York, trustee of the New York Zoological Society, member of the American Museum of Natural History, institutions which, like so many elite-controlled bodies, are heavily involved in spreading the theory of evolution. The Vincent Astor Foundation today holds roughly $100 million tax-exempt dollars, gives to Catholic and Episcopalian needs, gives to agencies opposed to private ownership of guns, gives to the New York Public Library. Imagine how much influence that purchases. The name Astor is, in my reading, a variant of Astorga, a family of southern Italy before the 1600s, and both names derive from Astarte, who is the mother of the occult, and Babylon, Semiramis, in Egypt, Isis. The Waldorf coven had important personages in the witchcraft system, and the Astor family within Waldorf had standing. Valentin Jun, Astor's mentor in Waldorf, may well have belonged to the Ordo Saturnus, an old German Satanic order whose very name means the Order of Satan. John Jacob's son incinerated his father's personal and business records. The truth was kept in the family. 3 of John Jacob's relatives were captains on clipper ships. He had connections in London to the Backhouse family, an aristocratic house, which is unexplained by his supposed poverty. The Holland Lodge No. 8 is said to have conducted business in German, which is curious given that so many of its members had English as their mother tongue. He traded in firearms used in at least one Latin American revolution, and Latin American revolutions, I remind the reader, were planned in Masonic lodges. When his fur trappers were paid in letters of credit, Astor agents were sent to ambush and kill them so the company would save money. Zachary Taylor said of them, "Take the American Fur Company in the aggregate, and they are the greatest scoundrels the world ever knew." Ava Alice Muriel Astor, born 1902, was an occultist who believed she was the reincarnation of an Egyptian princess and a disciple of Akhenaten. She may have been one of the first to enter the tomb of Tutankhamun, from which she took a necklace. She did occult work with Aldous Huxley, whose Brave New World, in my reading, was not an exposé but a blueprint. The Astor orphans, the Chandler branch, show all the earmarks of the Satanic hierarchy. The Rokeby mansion was haunted. Robert, Elizabeth, and Armstrong Chandler bore the marks of multiple personality disorder and satanic ritual abuse. John Armstrong Chandler practiced what he called esoteric Buddhism, went into trances, did automatic writing, and his eye color changed when the spirit worked through him. The Roosevelts and Delanos, a black Venetian noble family, intermarried with the Astors. Franklin Hughes Delano married Lavia Astor. James Roosevelt married Helen Astor. James Roosevelt, a Freemason, married the sister of Vincent Astor's wife. The Hellfire Club, a satanic cult linked to early Freemasonry, was led by men including Benjamin Franklin, who participated in satanic sexual rituals in caves under Sir Francis Dashwood's estate at West Wycombe in the summers of 1772, 1773, and 1774. Franklin was the head of the American Freemasons, the head of the Rosicrucians, a member of the Order of the Quest. Sir Francis Bacon in 1594 led the Order of the Knights of the Helmet and was made Prince of Purple. The Masonic-style ceremony was disguised as a play. These are the spiritual ancestors of the world the Astors moved into. The 1894 novel A Journey in Other Worlds, written by John Jacob Astor I, describes a society organized around the conservation of energy. Strange how the elite enjoy promoting conservation to the rest of us. John Jacob Astor I had, in life, a reputation for insatiable lust to pall women. The Titanic the same year was a judgment from God upon the pride of the world. We do not need to argue with the supernatural framing of this chapter to evaluate it. We can leave the question of demons, blood, and witchcraft to the conscience of every reader. What we can do, and what we are going to do, one by one, is check the dates, the names, the dollar amounts, and the institutional links against the documentary record. We score each claim against 3 tiers of source. Tier 1 is the closest we get to bedrock. Court filings, U.S. federal records, the National Archives, peer-reviewed academic history, biographies from university presses, the Library of Congress, own write-ups. Tier 2 is the mainstream consensus. Britannica, the New York Times, the BBC, the British Academy, the Federal Reserve History Project, Museum and Historical Society publications. Tier 3 is the independent layer. Long-form reporting, well-sourced popular biographies, archived periodicals, fact-checker explainers, and Wikipedia, where it pulls its citations from tiers 1 and 2. The verdicts we will hand out: confirmed, mixed, unsupported, contradicted, UNFALSIFIABLE, 40 named claims to work through. Here we go. The book opens with the bare facts of John Jacob Astor's life, and it gets most of them right, with one obvious typo and one quiet error. Born Waldorf, Duchy of Baden, July 17, 1763. Confirmed at Tier 1 by Britannica's signed scholarly entry and by the Library of Congress, a fortune made from fur. The book says he died in 1884. That is a transposition of 1848, which is when he actually died. We grade that one as a typo, not a substantive error. Born of a Jewish bloodline whose Jewish origins the family worked hard to hide. Unsupported, and on the documentary record contradicted. Every standard biographical source, Justin Kaplan, Derek Wilson, the German Historical Institute's Immigrant Entrepreneurship Project, describes the Astor family as Lutheran and Reformed Protestants. John Jacob himself was baptized Lutheran and remained an active member of the German Reformed congregation in New York. Genealogical research traces the family to a northern Italian Protestant line, possibly Waldensian, a persecuted Christian dissenting sect that fled Catholic persecution northward into the Palatinate. There is no primary source, no parish register, no archive document, no scholarly biography that establishes a Jewish line. The claim exists only inside the Springmeier-Coleman conspiracy literature. Verdict: unsupported. John Jacob himself was a butcher in Waldorf. Mixed. His father, Johann Jacob Sr., was the village butcher. John Jacob worked in the family shop from about age 14 to 16 as his father's assistant, then left for London at 16 to join his brother George at the Astor and Broadwood musical instrument firm. So the book has the trade right, but assigns the occupation to the son instead of the father, a kernel of truth, with a small overstatement of independent profession. Came to America in 1784 by way of London. Confirmed. He went to London around 1779, learned English, then sailed for America in late 1783 and landed at Baltimore in March 1784. Britannica. Married Sarah Todd. Confirmed. September 19, 1785, in New York. Sarah brought a $300 dowry and worked the fur trade alongside him for decades. Encyclopedia.com has the marriage details from the standard biographical record. Holland Lodge No. 8, NYC, Worshipful Master by 1788, Grand Treasurer of the Grand Lodge of New York from 1796 to 1801, Junior Grand Warden twice. Mixed, mostly confirmed. Holland Lodge's own surviving records. These are primary. Tier 1, confirmed John Jacob Astor as Worshipful Master in 1788. The Grand Treasurer dates are off by 2 years. He served from June 1798 to June 1801, not from 1796. So the Masonic involvement is real and well documented. The start date on the Treasurer roll is wrong. This is the first of what becomes a pattern in this chapter. Springmeier consistently runs about 1 to 2 years off on dates, suggesting he was working from a secondary source and not from the primary archives. The book's most concrete bombshell, that Thomas Jefferson and Treasury Secretary Albert Gallatin, both alleged Illuminati members, gave John Jacob Astor a private exemption from the 1807 embargo, and Astor netted close to $200,000 on a single voyage. Stripped of the Illuminati framing, this episode is real, and it is well documented at Tier 1. And the actual story is, if anything, stranger than Springmeier's version. The vessel was the brig Beaver. The pretext was a Cantonese shopkeeper named Punqua Wing Chong, who had been living in New York, and whom Astor's network presented to Jefferson as a high-ranking Chinese mandarin, urgently needing to return home to attend to his grandfather's death. Jefferson, sympathetic to a stranded foreign dignitary and confident in the diplomatic optics, authorized passage. Gallatin signed off. The Beaver sailed in August 1808. It returned in June 1809 with a cargo of teas, silks, and nankeens valued at well over $200,000. Philadelphia merchants protested it as a fraud, and historians have generally agreed. Wing Chong was a shopkeeper, not a mandarin, and the whole thing was an Astor scheme. The primary documents are preserved at the National Archives Founders Online Project, including the original letter from Punqua Wing Chong to Jefferson, dated July 22, 1808. The Redex archival report, Mr. Jefferson's Mandarin, lays out the deception in detail. So Springmeier is right that the favor was given, that it was a private exemption from the embargo, and that Astor cleared roughly $200,000. He is wrong about the cause. It was not an Illuminati conspiracy. It was a clever scam by Astor that exploited Jefferson's diplomatic instincts. Confirmed as to the facts of the favor and the dollar figure. The framing, Jefferson and Gallatin as fellow Illuminati conspiratorially favoring a bloodline cousin, is unsupported. The follow-up claim that the same John Jacob Astor was a British secret agent, per John Coleman's conspirators, Hierarchy, the story of the Committee of 300, does not survive scrutiny. Coleman's own claimed MI6 background has never been independently verified. No primary document, no British archive, no academic biography names Astor as a British intelligence asset. Indeed, Astor spent his career battling British monopoly interests, the Hudson's Bay Company, the Northwest Company, for control of the North American fur trade, which is the opposite of what a British agent would do. Unsupported. The fur monopoly, RIIA, Astoria, Oregon, named after his operation, RIIA. The American Fur Company was chartered in 1808 and became the dominant U.S. fur enterprise, described by historians as effectively the first American business monopoly. John Jacob sold his interest on June 1, 1834, to Ramsey Crooks for the Northern Department, and to Pratt & Chouteau for the Western. The Pacific Fur Company, his attempt to flank the British by establishing a Columbia River foothold, built Fort Astoria in 1811 at the river's mouth. The settlement that grew there became the town of Astoria, Oregon. Britannica confirms the corporate history. The Oregon Encyclopedia confirms the founding date and naming. Confirmed. Whether Astoria, Oregon, is today a hotbed for satanic covens, That is not a claim we can falsify with public data. It belongs to the unfalsifiable layer. We note it and move on. John Jacob Astor and the China opium trade, exiting publicly in 1818, mixed, substantively confirmed with a one-year discrepancy. Astor bought Turkish-sourced opium from Smyrna, the same supply chain that fed the rival Russell and Company, and shipped it to Canton, beginning around 1816. The most authoritative source on this, the Business History Review article, American Merchants and the China Opium Trade, 1800 to 1840, from Cambridge University Press, places his exit from the China opium trade in 1819, not 1818. He continued some opium dealings in the British and Levant markets for several more years after that. So the book has the substance right. Astor was in the opium trade, and his exit from the China end of it falls within a year of his stated date. The bigger claim, that the Committee of 300 chose which Americans were allowed into the opium trade, that the British East India Company was its instrument, and that the Russells were another chosen family. This collapses into John Coleman's framework, which once again has no documentary anchor. The British East India Company's opium monopoly did exist as a matter of corporate history, and American merchants were among those who traded into Canton, against, and around it. But the picture of a secret legislative committee selecting bloodline beneficiaries is not in any historian's account of the trade. The kernel, opium was massively lucrative, Astor was in it, is confirmed. The Committee of 300 framing is unsupported. By 1844, Astor's wealth equaled 1/15 of every dollar invested in American manufacturing. Springmeier, citing Gustavus Meyer's History of the Great American Fortunes, page 147, 1909. UNFALSIFIABLE, as written. Meyer's 3-volume work from 1909 is real, it is a recognized muckraking classic, and it does treat the scale of Astor's fortune at length. But the precise 1/15 of all American manufacturing capital comparison is a 19th century rhetorical figure whose underlying ratio is highly sensitive to what gets counted as manufacturing capital. What we can confirm at Tier 1 through Project Gutenberg's full text of the Myers original is that Astor's roughly $20 million estate at his 1848 death was, in modern equivalent terms, close to 1% of U.S. GDP. He was, by any measure, among the richest Americans of his era. The specific fraction Springmeier reports is part of the historiographic record. Whether it survives a modern recalculation is a different question. Verdict: cited but uncorroborated rhetoric. Order of magnitude correct, precision unverifiable. By 1890, the Astors owned 1/20th of all New York City real estate, confirmed as a contemporary estimate. This figure circulates widely in late 19th century New York commentary, including the Forum magazine article the book itself cites. City Realty and the Collector's History of the Family both reproduce it. It captures the family's documented dominance as the landlords of New York through the period. The Astors today are worth roughly $40 billion. Unsupported. No mainstream source supports a $40 billion Astor valuation in 1995, or now. The fortune dispersed across multiple branches and was eroded by estate taxes, divorces, and divisions over the 20th century. Brooke Astor's estate at her 2007 death was approximately $130 million. The extended family's aggregated wealth lands somewhere in the low hundreds of millions to the low single-digit billions on a generous count. $40 billion is order of magnitude high and unsighted. Astor on the 5-director seat of Hamilton's Bank of the United States. Mixed. Astor was, in fact, a presidentially nominated director of a Bank of the United States, confirmed by the Senate on April 23, 1816, holding one of the 5 federally appointed seats on the 25-member board. But that was the second Bank of the United States, not Hamilton's. Hamilton founded the first bank in 1791. Hamilton was killed in his duel with Aaron Burr in 1804, 12 years before the second bank even existed. The Federal Reserve History Project documents the second bank's structure and Astor's role. So the Colonel, Astor, was a federally appointed director of an American central bank is confirmed. The Hamilton attribution is contradicted. The 1837 panic foreclosures, confirmed. During the Panic of 1837, Astor bought distressed Manhattan properties cheaply, and when the borrowers could not keep up with the unusually high interest rates on the mortgages he held, foreclosed. One source counts roughly 70 foreclosures from that period. The Eden Farm Tract, what later became Times Square, is the textbook example. John Hager's Wayne State University press biography is the Tier 1 source. Colonel John Jacob Astor IV died on the Titanic, April 15, 1912. His body was recovered April 22nd, confirmed. Encyclopedia Titanica. He wrote A Journey in Other Worlds, published 1894 by D. Appleton and Company, New York, confirmed. The full text is on Project Gutenberg. The novel really does describe the souls of the righteous dwelling on Saturn. Springmeier quotes that passage accurately. Whether Saturn means Satan, and whether the novel is therefore a confession in fiction, is interpretive. The literal publication and the literal quoted passage are real. Waldorf opened at 33rd and 5th Avenue, March 13, 1893. The Astoria opened November 1, 1897, adjacent at 34th and 5th. The combined hotel was demolished in 1929 to build the Empire State Building. Confirmed. Small nuance. William Waldorf Astor built only the original Waldorf wing. John Jacob Astor IV, the man who later went down with the Titanic, built the Astoria edition. The book elides this, but the dates and the site are right. William Waldorf Astor owned the Pall Mall Gazette, the Observer, and Pall Mall magazine. Confirmed. He bought the Pall Mall Gazette in 1892, founded Pall Mall magazine in 1893, and acquired the Observer in 1911. Wikipedia, citing the standard William Waldorf Astor biographical record. The Astors owned the Times of London from 1922. Confirmed, but already obsolete when the book was written. John Jacob Astor, the first Baron Astor of Hever, bought roughly 9/10 of the Times in 1922 from the Northcliffe estate for £1,580,000, and the family chaired it until his son Gavin sold to Roy Thompson in 1966. By the time Springmeier published in 1995, the Astors had been out of the Times for nearly 30 years. Britannica. The Astors helped found the Pilgrim Society in 1901. Mixed. The Pilgrim Society was founded in London on July 11, 1902, and in New York on January 13, 1903, not 1901, and there is no 1901 founding event. The inaugural New York meeting was held at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, and JJAIV was among the founding American members. So Astor involvement in the Pilgrims is confirmed. The year is off by 1 to 2 years. Astor's among the financial backers of the Round Table groups in 1910, alongside A. Bailey, with Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner founding the Inner Society of the Elect. Mixed. The Round Table movement was founded between 1909 and 1910, funded primarily by the Rhodes Trust and by Sir A. Bailey. The Georgetown historian Carroll Quigley documented Rhodes' Society of the Elect as a real inner circle predecessor. Quigley's Anglo-American establishment is the academic source. But significant Astor financial involvement in the Round Table did not appear until later, through Waldorf Astor's chairmanship of the RIIA, and not as a co-founding contributor in 1910 alongside Bailey. The book overstates the 1910 Astor role. Astors as major backers of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, with Waldorf appointed, confirmed. RIIA Chatham House was chartered out of a meeting on May 30, 1919. Waldorf Astor was a founding member, provided significant funding, and served as chairman from 1935 to 1949. The University of Reading holds the Waldorf Astor collection in its archives. This is the Tier 1 primary source. David Astor at Bilderberg in 1957 and 1966. Mixed. Bilderberg's published participant lists confirmed David Astor attended the 1957 St. Simon's Island meeting and the 1959 Yesekoy meeting. The 1966 attendance specifically is not corroborated in available open sources. It may be accurate, but we can't verify it. Confirmed for 1957, unverified for 1966. Nancy Astor was the first woman to sit as a member of Parliament, confirmed. Elected for Plymouth Sutton on November 28, 1919, she took her seat on December 1, 1919. Constance Markievicz, a Sinn Féin abstentionist, was technically the first woman elected in 1918, but as a matter of policy never sat. The British Academy lays out the distinction. So Nancy Astor was the first woman to take a seat in the House of Commons. Nancy Astor as a devoted supporter of Christian Science, confirmed. She read Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health in her 30s, and her conversion was central to her parliamentary life. The University of Reading's Astor 100 research project documents this in scholarly depth. The Astors, as backers of the appeasement policy that allowed Hitler to become a threat, mixed, and in its strongest form, contradicted. The Cliveden set label was coined in 1937 by the communist journalist Claude Cockburn in his newsletter The Week, framing an alleged aristocratic pro-Nazi conspiracy meeting at Cliveden. Modern scholarship, Norman Rose's The Cliveden Set, Portrait of an Exclusive Fraternity from 2000, is the definitive treatment, has firmly rejected the conspiracy version of the story. The Astors hosted a wide guest list including socialists and committed anti-appeasers. Nancy and Waldorf Astor were themselves on the Nazi Black Book of arrest targets to be executed if Britain fell. The set functioned more as a high society policy salon than as a Nazi-sympathizing cabal. So there is a real kernel. Nancy Astor was sympathetic to appeasement in the mid-1930s, but the conspiratorial framing of an Illuminati Astor-Hitler enabling axis is rejected by current historians. Owen Lattimore, as the Astor proxy for the opium trade, working through Laura Spellman and the Institute of Pacific Relations, and the IPR as the entity that laid the groundwork for Pearl Harbor, unsupported, and on Lattimore specifically, contradicted. Owen Lattimore was a sinologist and the editor of Pacific Affairs, the academic journal of the Institute of Pacific Relations. He was investigated by Senator Pat McCarran's subcommittee in 1951 and 1952 for alleged pro-communist sympathies, not for opium dealing of any kind. There is no documented connection between Lattimore and any Astor opium proxy arrangement. Springmeier writes that Lattimore worked through Laura Spellman, and here we hit a giveaway. Laura Spellman was John D. Rockefeller's wife, and her name is preserved in the Laura Spellman Rockefeller Memorial, a Rockefeller philanthropy. The memorial did fund IPR research. So Springmeier appears to have read about Rockefeller philanthropic money flowing into the IPR, mistaken Laura Spellman for a person currently in operation, attributed the influence to the Astor family rather than the Rockefellers, and added opium with no source. Robert Newman's Owen Lattimore and the Loss of China from the University of California Press is the standard biographical record. As for the IPR laying the groundwork for Pearl Harbor, this is a McCarran-era political artifact, not a serious historical claim. No modern historian argues that the IPR caused the December 1941 attack. The Pacific War had its roots in Japanese imperial expansion, the U.S. oil and steel embargoes, and the broader East Asian geopolitical contest of the 1930s. The IPR was a Pacific Studies Institute. The Time magazine archive, even from 1952, contemporary mainstream reporting, distinguished the McCarran charges from any claim of direct war causation. Unsupported. John Jacob Astor III supported Mayor Fernando Wood and the Boss Tweed Ring. Mixed. The substance is right, the names are off. It was William B. Astor, J.J.A. III's father, who supported Fernando Wood. John Jacob Astor III served on Mayor A. Oakey Hall's Six Businessman Blue Ribbon Commission that whitewashed Tweed's books in 1870, signing a certificate that the books had been faithfully kept, a signature that became infamous when Tweed's looting was exposed the next year. So Astor's support of Tammany corruption is documented, just not in quite the configuration the book draws. Vincent Astor's positions on the boards of Chase Manhattan, American Express, Western Union, the Great Northern Railroad, the Illinois Central, the International Mercantile Marine Company, and so on, and a membership in roughly 41 private clubs. Mixed. The directorships at Chase, Western Union, and the United States Lines are well documented. American Express and the railroad directorships appear in some biographical sources, but not in others. We cannot fully verify the list as printed. The 41 private clubs figure is a Springmeier-only number. No mainstream biographical source quantifies it that precisely. Real Colonel Vincent Astor sat on multiple major boards. Unverified detail. The specific count. Ava Alice Muriel Astor as an occultist who believed she was a reincarnated Egyptian princess, possibly among the first to enter Tut's tomb, took a necklace. Mixed. Alice Muriel Astor, born 1902 and died 1956, did believe she was the reincarnation of an Egyptian princess, and did wear an artifact-style necklace associated with the Tutankhamun era. Her father, J.J.A.I.V., the Titanic victim, had financially supported some of Howard Carter's earlier excavations, and she traveled in Egypt with Carter's Circle in the 1920s. whether she physically entered the tomb among the first visiting parties, and whether her necklace was an authentic artifact from the tomb or simply a piece given to the family during the 1920s Egyptomania, is not clear in available sources. The reincarnation belief itself is UNFALSIFIABLE, but her holding of that belief is documented in her biographical record. The factual kernel, Astor heiress, Egyptian eccentricity, Carter Circle, is confirmed. The specific took a necklace from inside the tomb claim is unsupported, as stated. Huxley's Brave New World as a blueprint rather than an expose, contradicted. Scholarly consensus and Huxley's own subsequent writing, especially Brave New World revisited from 1958, classify the novel as a satirical warning about technocratic dehumanization. Huxley repeatedly expressed alarm that his fictional dystopia was arriving faster than he had feared. The blueprint framing is a recurring hallmark of conspiracy literature, not literary history. The book and its sequel are both available in their entirety. Readers can check. Benjamin Franklin, as a member of the Hellfire Club, who joined satanic sexual rituals in caves at West Wickham, mixed, and in its strong form, contradicted. Franklin was a personal friend of Sir Francis Dashwood, the Hellfire Club's founder, and is documented as having visited West Wickham. One of the chalk caves there is even called Franklin's Cave. But historians do not classify Franklin as a member of the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Caves, own historic site documentation, and standard Franklin biographies characterize Dashwood's club as an elite parody society combining heavy drinking, mock religious revelry, and bawdy private theatricals. Characterizing it as Satanism, in any theological sense, is myth-making from the 19th and 20th centuries, not from the 18th century record. Contradicted as to Satanism confirmed that Franklin was a guest at West Wickham. Sir Francis Bacon as the head of an Order of the Knights of the Helmet, and crowned Prince of Purple in 1594, mixed. The Honorable Order of the Knights of the Helmet was a fictional ceremonial creation inside the Gray's Inn Christmas revels of 1594 and 1595, recorded in the document called the Gesta Grayorum. Bacon was almost certainly the author or chief organizer of the revels, but it was a mock court entertainment, not a secret society. The mock monarch role for that year, the Prince of Purple, not Purple, was held by a law student named Henry Helms, not by Bacon. The Francis Bacon Research Trust has a scholarly essay on the Knights of the Helmet that lays the structure out. So there was a real ceremonial creation tied to Bacon and the 1594 Gray's Inn revels, Colonel. But Bacon was not literally crowned, and characterizing the revels as an occult society initiation overstates a literary entertainment. Standard Bacon biographies, Spedding, Jardine, Stewart, do not corroborate claims about occult initiations on his European tour. James Roosevelt married Helen Astor. Franklin Hughes Delano married Laura. The book writes Lavia, Astor. James Roosevelt was a Freemason married into the Astor line. Confirmed on the marriages. James Roosevelt Rosie Roosevelt, FDR's older half-brother, married Helen Schermerhorn Astor, daughter of William Backhouse Astor Jr., on November 18, 1878. Franklin Hughes Delano married Laura Eugenia Astor, granddaughter of John Jacob Astor, on September 17, 1844. The Delano family as Black Venetian nobility, contradicted. This is a Lyndon LaRouche organization, conspiracy framing without primary source support. The Delano family was a Huguenot-descended American merchant line, Delanois, Flemish-French in origin, not Venetian. Springmeier appears to be borrowing the black nobility framework from LaRouche-derived literature. The name Astor derives from Astarte, the Babylonian moon goddess. Contradicted. The standard etymological consensus, drawing on Occitan and Old French, traces Astor to Astor, Latin for hawk or goshawk. It is a falconry name, common in southern French and northern Italian onomastics. The Astarte derivation is an Alexander Hislop folk etymology from the Two Babylons in 1853, repeated in much later conspiracy writing, and it is not supported by any work of historical linguistics. We have to call this out plainly. This technique, name equals pagan deity, therefore occult, is a Hislop signature, and the modern conspiracy literature that uses it inherits its methods straight from a 19th century anti-Catholic tract. The Astors as descendants of the Astorga family of southern Italy, mixed. Family records trace the Astors to Giovan Pietro Astor, born 1593 in Cliveden, northern Italy, near the Swiss border, not southern. The family fled north into Heidelberg and Waldorf during the Protestant persecutions. A Spanish Astorga noble connection was specifically constructed by William Waldorf Astor in the late 19th century when he was lobbying for a British peerage. So the Italian origin is real, but the geography is reversed, and the Spanish noble link is a 19th century PR project rather than medieval pedigree. Some of what the book says cannot be tested by any documentary record. We are honest about that. The existence of a committee of 300 ruling world events as a hidden legislature, this exists only in John Coleman's writings, and the literature derived from them. No primary source describes such a body. The claim that the Astor family practiced witchcraft in Waldorf, that the Holland Lodge in New York was a satanic command post, that the family inherited occult power, that Astoria, Oregon is today a hotbed for satanic covens, that the Ordo Saturnus existed as a real 18th century German satanic order whose name itself means the Order of Satan, that Ava Alice Muriel Astor's belief in her own past life as an Egyptian princess was a real metaphysical fact, that the Chandler children carried marks of multiple personality disorder from ritual abuse. They are not falsifiable by records of any kind. We can note that the Ordo Saturnus, as an organization, is not attested in any primary German archive of the period. The name first appears in occult society literature of the early 20th century, well after John Jacob Astor's death. But the deeper question, whether a satanic hierarchy genuinely directs human history, is outside the domain of historical fact-checking. We leave that to the conscience of every viewer. The one thing we can say plainly is this. Every time Springmeier attaches the supernatural framing to a verifiable historical fact in this chapter, the verifiable fact is either correct, partly correct, or invented, and the supernatural framing is added on top. It does not generate the facts, it dresses them. 40 claims, scored. Here is the verdict. Astor born Waldorf 1763, confirmed. Astor of hidden Jewish bloodline, unsupported. Butcher in Waldorf, mixed. His father, not him. Came to America 1784 via London, confirmed. Holland Lodge Master 1788, Grand Treasurer 1796, mixed. Treasurer dates are 1798. Jefferson and Gallatin grant 1807 embargo exemption, $200,000, confirmed via the Punqua Wing Chong scam. John Jacob Astor, a British secret agent, unsupported, built fur monopoly, exited 1834, confirmed. Astoria, Oregon named for him, confirmed. Opium trade, exit 1818, mixed, exited 1819, foreclosed on mortgages, panic of 1837, confirmed. Director of Hamilton's Bank of the United States, mixed, second bank, not Hamilton's. Wealth 1/15th of U.S. manufacturing capital by 1844, UNFALSIFIABLE. 1/20th of New York City real estate by 1890, confirmed as contemporary estimate. Married Sarah Todd, confirmed. Astor 1V died on Titanic, confirmed. Astor 1V wrote A Journey in Other Worlds in 1894, confirmed. Waldorf 1893, Astoria 1897, site became Empire State Building, confirmed. Astors helped found Pilgrim Society 1901, mixed. Founded 1902-03, Astors among 1910 Round Table financial founders, mixed. Major backers of RIIA Waldorf chaired, confirmed. Astors owned the Times of London from 1922, confirmed, until 1966. William Waldorf owned Pall Mall Gazette, Observer, Pall Mall Magazine, confirmed. Nancy Astor, first woman MP, confirmed. David Astor at Bilderberg, 1957 and 1966. Mixed, 1957 confirmed, 1966 unverified. Waldorf Astor led PEP, unsupported. Nancy Astor supported Christian Science, confirmed. Lattimore and Astor opium proxy via Spellman, contradicted. IPR laid groundwork for Pearl Harbor, unsupported. Cliveden Astors enabled Hitler, mixed. Appeasement sympathy, yes. Nazi enabling cabal, no. Astor 3, supported Tweed, mixed. Names off, substance right. Vincent Astor on Chase Amex, Western Union, 41 clubs. Mixed. Colonel real, count unverified. Alice Astor, an occultist. Tut tomb necklace. Mixed. Eccentric belief documented. Tomb entry unsupported. Brave New World. A blueprint, not expose. Contradicted. Roosevelt and Delano married into Astor line. Confirmed. But Black Venetian nobility framing contradicted. Astor from Astarte, contradicted. From Latin Astor, the hawk. Astors from Southern Italian Astorga line. Mixed. Northern Italian, not Southern. Franklin in Satanic rituals at West Wickham. Mixed. Visited, yes. Satanism, no. Bacon-led Knights of the Helmet. Crowned Prince of Purple, 1594. Mixed. Gray's Inn revels were real but theatrical, not a cult, and the prince was Henry Helms. Astor family worth $40 billion today, unsupported. Tally, 10 clean confirmations. 16 mixed verdicts, where the named event is real but the framing is overstated. 7 unsupported. 2 flatly contradicted. 1 unfalsifiable. The rest belong to the spiritual world we cannot reach with documents. Here is the single pattern that comes out of the Astor chapter, and it will recur in every chapter we cover. Springmeier is at his best as a list keeper. The Astors really did finance the RIIA, really did own the Times, really did sit on Bilderberg, really did dominate New York real estate, really did get a private embargo favor from Jefferson, really did die on the Titanic. The factual scaffolding holds. Where the chapter falls apart is in 2 specific moves. The etymology as evidence move. Astor means Astarte, therefore Babylonian moon goddess, which is a 19th century anti-Catholic technique imported wholesale, and the Committee of 300 move, the insertion of an invisible governing body behind every documented event, sourced only to one other conspiracy author whose own credentials don't verify. Strip those 2 moves out, and what is left is something a serious historian of American wealth would recognize. A family that consolidated capital, married into political power, funded the Anglo-American policy establishment, and shaped the press. That is a real and important story. It is also not the story Springmeier is telling. Next chapter, the Bundys, Skull and Bones, the Vietnam War, and the question of whether a serial killer named Ted Bundy belongs in the family at all.